The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm Rob Meyer. I'm going to be your host today. We're going to begin in a couple moments, but first, I just wanted to make sure you knew how to navigate your way around the online conference. So first, can you raise your hands and let me know that you can see us and not having any issues? Looks like we're good. We're getting some hands up. So appreciate that. So you're going to be on mute. If you have any questions, I don't recommend talking. Just enter your questions in the field, in the question field in the control panel. You should be able to see that in your lower right-hand side. And I'll be watching throughout. I'm going to answer some of the questions, but I'm going to save the hardest ones for Andrey. So at the end of the webinar, I will line up some of the best ones. So Andrey, get ready and ask away. So we're going to record this as well. If you miss something or you want the slides, we're going to be sending that out within a couple days. Now, let me introduce Andrey for those of you who don't know him or haven't seen him up on the Ignite community answering questions. This webinar is going to be all about monitoring and managing Apache Ignite or GridGain. And Andrey Evsukov is one of the ideal people to do this. He has worked for a while in computer science. He studied in the US and worked for a while in various banks, and then has worked doing mission critical operations within a host of banks. But that's not even the best reason why he's the ideal presenter for this. He's the head of operations for running GridGain in the cloud and keeping it up and running. So if anybody's seen a lot of the tips and tricks that's needed to do that and has a lot of the internal advice from GridGain and the Ignite community, it's Andrey. So with that, let me turn it over to Andrey.
Hello, everybody. Great to start this, webcast. It's one of my first webcasts for GridGain company, and it's an honor for me. So let's start. Today, I would like to cover some topics that would help you to manage and monitor Ignite or GridGain platform. We're going to go over some basic stuff like GridGain web console, snapshot utility, command line interface for Visor, control script, and I'll show you what we've done in the past in Russia using third-party tools for monitoring Ignite or GridGain. GridGain console. Let's talk about that for a second. GridGain console is very useful instrument to do basic and some advanced tasks for the platform. Web console has same functionality as Visor. That is not, unfortunately, Visor is not developed anymore, but you don't need to worry about that. Web console would have all new functionality built in and old functionality. And if you'd like to, you can log in into our website, console.gridgain.com, and you can try it out and see how it works nice and easily. You can deploy GridGain web console to your local network using Docker. A backend for this web console was written in JavaScript. Node.js has a MongoDB behind it, front end, AngularJS, Bootstrap, and JavaScript. One thing you need to remember, when you start your grid, and to use it with the web console, the grid should be started with Ignite REST module. Let's look at top-level architectural diagram on how web console works. Web console agent is a separate program that connects to Ignite cluster over REST HTTP protocol. Web console agent needs to be downloaded from the web console server. Cluster should be started with Ignite REST HTTP library. You got to remember that web agent sends and collects information from the grid to the web console. So basically, web agent plays a proxy role in communication between web console and grid installation. And to use it, it's pretty straightforward, especially if you've been using Visor. And in terms of usability and stability, it's quite stable and very useful. GridGain console includes management and monitoring functionality for GridGain and Apache Ignite clusters. It also provides an interactive configuration wizards, which helps you to create and download configuration files and code snippets for your Apache Ignite or GridGain project. Additionally, the tool allows you to automatically load SQL metadata from any database to run SQL queries in your in-memory cache, as well as view extension plans in memory schemas and streaming charts. GridGain Web Console configures wizards takes you through a step-by-step procedure to determine all required configuration parameters. The system then generates ready-to-use projects with the required config files for you that you can use it in your configuration. To speed creation of your configuration files, Web Console allows you automatically import the database schemas from any RDBMS. GridGain and Apache Ignite support virtually any RDBMS, including Oracle, SAP, MySQL, Postgres, and many others. With Web Console, you can run free form SQL queries on GridGain clusters caches. By connecting Web Console to your Apache Ignite cluster, you can execute SQL queries on your in-memory cache. You can also view execution plans in memory schemas and streaming charts for your cluster. Monitor and managing a running GridGain Apache deployment. Web Console facilitates managing and monitoring of GridGain and Apache Ignite clusters. You can view various heap, CPU, and other useful node and cache metrics, start and stop caches and nodes, take thread dumps from remote nodes, and perform other useful management and monitoring tasks.
Hey, one quick question, Andrey, before we move on. I've heard that people I've seen some examples of MongoDB and Cassandra as well, so NoSQL databases can be used as well?
Basically, any database can be used, as far as I know.
Okay, great.
As long as, you know, correct drivers are available, we can connect it and use it.
Perfect.
All right, snapshot utility, one of the important tools within installation of the grid. You can do many different tasks and automate those tasks using this utility within scripts. One of the major options is to create incremental or full snapshots. You need to note that before you can create incremental snapshot, you have to create a full snapshot prior creating an incremental snapshot. Also, you can do restore data from your snapshot. Also, you can restore it on certain cache groups or cache that you specify. So you don't have to restore everything at once. You can do separate chunks that you want. Checks will perform possibility to restore current snapshot into current topology. Also, if you're restoring into a different topology, you can skip the check with the force option if it's needed. Visor command line interface provides scriptable monitoring capabilities for Ignite. It can be used to get statistics about nodes, caches, and tasks in the grid. General details about the topology shows various metrics and nodes configuration properties can also be viewed there. You gotta make sure, very important note, that Visor command line connects into the grid topology as server node by default. Unfortunately, if you want to connect it as a client node, you have to do some tinkering with the configuration files, but that would be advanced techniques and we're probably not going to cover it here. On next slide, we have a commands that's available for your command line interface with the description of what they do. Control script is very cool utility where you can change baseline, start, idle, verify. Idle verify is used to find possible differences in partitions. Also, we can print list of partitions and other useful tasks. But you gotta remember that cluster, when you using idle verify, needs to be without any clients connected to it and without any loads. Otherwise, you'll have different reports can result in false positive error reports. And now let's start with more fun stuff. What do we have right here on larger enterprises? One of our customers uses third-party tools like Zabbix and Grafana to monitor their large-scale environments that include 2 separate grids with over 200 nodes. Also, they are using Elasticsearch to analyze log files from the server nodes. Here's an overview on how this monitoring solution looks like. As data sources we're gathering, it's OS metrics from hosts, log files from nodes, and using ambient objects to collect all necessary data over GMX. What data do we use to monitor? Our Grafana desktop, we can see an overview of the grid platform health. We have many different dashboards that shows information about different parts of the system. For example, we can see CPU, network, or disk usage, amount of server and client nodes that's in topology. Through the log files, we can see long-running transactions, partition map exchange, out-of-memory errors, assertion errors, and other exceptions. And based on this, our 24/7 team can help out our customer in terms of determining where the problem is. I'll go in detail on what some of those metrics we use and what dashboards we use. What do we have up here is a part of dashboards shows the key information for the grid cluster. Topology version changes when the server or client nodes leaves or joins the topology. This helps to control grid topology. Total nodes show amount of servers and clients nodes in the point of time. Last snapshot, start time, last time when operation was started on snapshot, such as create, check, move, or delete. Last snapshot finish time is last time when operation finished. Last two metrics is very useful when automation tasks are performed on the snapshot. Those metrics are useful to control amount of nodes in the grid. One of those three parameters, if one of those three parameters is differ, that means that one might have a problem with the grid. One way to check amount of nodes baseline is to run control.sh script. Split brain that can occur when cluster is segmented and two or more coordinators are presented within the same grid. To solve this problem, you will need to restart one part of the segmented grid, and you can use different techniques to determine which part of segmented grid you need to restart. Last coordinator time shows how long ago node became the coordinator. This is needed to understand if coordinator had the problem. All those metrics are available over GMX. We monitor 3 different queues. In our experience, it was very useful to monitor those queues because we can determine if we had any problem. For example, with Instruct Executor, general queue for all incoming connections, where TCP discovery SPI discovery queue that uses to discover of nodes on the grid. If this queue value is over 0 for a long time, that means that we have a problem with the discovery to nodes. TCP communication SPI, overall metrics between nodes. If we see values over 0 for some time, that means that problem node had difficulties with the processing messages. If we see incremental raise on those panels or any values that holds more than a 0, that indicates that the problem, well, that's a possible problem on the node. And those parameters are collected through GMX too. Many of us knows what GC policies are and how they can make your life hard, especially with a grid and big sizes grid. It's very important to know how much time it takes for garbage collector to work. If garbage collector takes too long, then node will be unavailable to process any incoming task. Right now, we collect this metric through the parsing of log files using our own scripts to determine how long it takes. Long-running transactions means the possibility of problems with the node to process transaction. This metric also collects through the log file parsing. And on the screen, you can see the list of the grids or nodes actually on which we have a possible problem with long-running transaction. And on the right side, you can see how long it takes for this long-running transaction to be hanging on the grid. Checkpoint time shows how much time it takes to write checkpoints. If this value increases or more than a threshold, that means that the node is not handling the node. We also collect this metric through the log file and our custom scripts. And probably everybody does this, is monitoring the free space and heap utilization. It's one of the very important OS metrics for us. GMX metric that shows topology version on each node to see where and when topology version changes on the nodes. Ideally, topology version should be the same on all nodes. Later on the bottom screen, you can see node order. Node order shows order of the nodes within the grid. Very helpful. This information very helpful for discovery investigation problems. Moving partitions show count of partition in a moving state. This happens during a rebalance, nodes and caches, and amount of partitions in moving very dangerous when you're doing some SQL requests on join caches, which some of them are partition caches and some of them replicated caches. So basically, when one of your caches is in moving state and it's replicated cache and you're trying to do a join, probably you're not going to be able to get the result that you're expecting. This metric is available through GMX. Also, another metrics available through GMX is transactions holding log number, count of transaction in hold status. The value should not be increasing or be over 100 for over 0 for a long time. Locked key numbers shows blocked keys. Same rules applies as above. Why do we need this? Well, with those metrics, we can investigate where and when performance would be degraded. So that way you can take preemptive strike to find out where the problem might occur. That would help to prevent bigger disaster if such happens. So basically that would be it. And guys, here's some stuff that we use for documentation and useful information. You can find metrics, GMX metrics for the classes on our Ignite Apache website. Information about third-party software monitoring that we used an example is Zabbix. It's one of the open source enterprise level software. Grafana is an open source and freeware application where you can visualize your queries and show nice and beautiful pictures on your screens. Resources, you can always visit our webinars, read our white papers. Here's the sites that's available for you. And pretty much everything that I've been talking in this presentation, you'll be able to find in our documentations. And for example, to try it out, your website console, you can visit console.gridgain.com. And last but not least, free 30-day Ultimate Enterprise and Professional Edition trial. You can download it from our website. Thank you very much, guys, for your patience, and hopefully webinar was interesting. So you guys got any questions? I'm happy to answer those.
All right, so there are a couple questions. I'll start rattling off some of them. So the first one, in no particular order here, was what would you recommend if I'm doing if I'm getting started? Should I just use Web Console, the hosted version, or should I just download it and get started locally right away?
I would suggest using the hosted version. That way you can use it, make sure that everything is configured correctly by our engineers, and that way you'll have less kind of option to have an error, and everything that generated on a web console can be then ported to your local installation with no problem.
Okay, so I can, if I'm generating config files in the hosted web console, I can download them locally and use them in the locally installed version?
Yes, Rob, that's
okay.
Exactly.
Are there some, another question, are there some good templates that people could go find online somewhere, some good examples to get started?
Not at this moment, but we are working on distributing those templates into the community, and those templates would be available at README.io and on our website within probably, I would say, within a month, hopefully, after we polish them out and get ready to share it with the community.
Okay. For something like Docker with Kubernetes, what combination of web console and scripting, what are some tips and tricks for the right balance of scripting and web console? What recommendations would you make if you were getting started?
To be honest, I don't have an answer for this question at the moment because I have not tried it myself, and the guys from my team have not tried it either. So if you can send me that question, I'll definitely go and look into this and send the answer as soon as I have it.
Okay, and for the person who's interested, you should also be posting things like this into the Ignite community, because if you post it there, generally someone's going to have a good answer. Have you ever done any measurements on how much of a performance impact the tracking of these stats has, and what would your recommendations be for turning on the stats versus keeping them off?
Well, turning stats always going to be posing some overhead, you know, but depending on which stats you're planning on turn on, some of them are resource consuming and some of them are not. So it's not, you know, you don't have a silver bullet for this. It depending on what you want to measure and gather statistics. For example, some of the statistics can be turned on through GMX on running grid, you know, kind of in a runnable state. And some of the statistics can be turned by log files, which require restarting the nodes. So it's basically depends. It's no right answer, let's put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on what you want to gather.
Do you ever try to escalate the messaging as you see a first problem go on happen? Do you try to capture more and more information, and how do you set some of those up?
We generally, if we have some problems that we don't have a solution, we're trying to turn debugging on for some of the classes using JConsole and GMX, and gathering those metrics within log files, we would be able to determine what's going on.
Okay. Another very specific question. Have you ever looked at AWS CloudWatch and how to monitor using CloudWatch?
Not at this moment, since we recently start moving towards the cloud. We have not looked into that kind of solution yet, but it's definitely in our work schedule. As soon as cloud version would be stable for us to try it out and see how it works, we definitely will go.
Yeah, I should add to that. GridGain Cloud, which is our cache as a service, is in beta, so you can always go to cloud.gridgain.com and try that. The console as well, web console, is also technically in beta, mostly because of SLAs. That we want people to understand that if they're going to go into a production environment, they may not want to be using a hosted web console that requires an HTTP connection to their production cluster. That it makes more sense for their own, it makes more sense for your own purposes to deploy web console locally with your application and manage the connection and manage your own environment. But you can certainly do the POC with the console, and you, as Andrey was saying, you can take the config files and move them into your own instance. Those were pretty much all the questions people had. I would add that if you're thinking about visiting the San Francisco Bay Area, there is an in-memory computing summit coming up October 2nd and 3rd. It's going to be near the San Francisco airport in the Hyatt Regency, and a lot of experts and various GridGain and Ignite users are showing up there. So feel free to join. We should be able to get you more information. You can sign up online, but you should also feel free to reach out directly to folks you know inside GridGain to try to get some invitations. So with that, Andrey, I want to thank you for sharing your practices, as always, with several of our speakers. If you do have more questions, they're usually up in the Ignite community watching, so feel free to ask your questions there.